Welcome back to Voices in Mystery. I'm your host, Nancy Carlson. With me now is someone who's been on the show several times before, and that's Sally Wright. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Sally has brought 2 books with her today, and they're just so new that they're hot. You know, they came directly off the press. One came out in June, and that is Watches of the Night. Mm-hmm. And one is coming out in a couple months, and that one is Code of Silence. So it is great. These are both Ben Reese series books, and Ben is an archivist.
He is.
And when you're an archivist, you have to know about a lot of different topics. So tell us what Ben has learned. What are some of his areas of expertise?
Ben is based on a real person who was an archivist in an Ohio university in the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and who was a behind-the-line scout in World War II.
Ooh.
And when I met him and really began to talk to him in the early 70s, I went, this is the character for me. This quiet, gentle, unassuming, witty intellectual who can kill you silently without you ever seeing it coming. That appealed to me, the citizen soldier who came back and made a life. So when the books take place in the early 60s, the fictional character has to be a jack of all trades as an archivist. Now a lot of them can really specialize. He had to restore paintings, identify coins and ancient documents, and restore all sorts of materials. So it's been great fun for me to learn the kinds of things that he would have known. And that changes, you know, who he meets, what a donor gives to the university. You're not locked into one location. He can travel on sabbatical. What he has to do can come out of who he meets and where he goes, and so it's not boring.
No, in fact, you could, you know, your next book could be about old perfume bottles. I mean,
it
could be about
anything. It could be.
Now, the character that you based Ben Reese on, does he know you've done this?
Oh yeah, I work with him all the time. He's 85. He never talked about what he did in the war. His wife was there when he had the nightmares, and he just went, there's no reason to talk about it. And he now says that it's really been good for him to do this and to help me with the books. He's 85 and he's still got more marbles than most of us start with. And I've had to learn things about the Second World War I never would have known. In Watches of the Night, the major part of that plot comes from the Allied, the US and the British tech teams, the scientists that we sent over during and then after the Second World War into German occupied territory to look for Nazi science. We wanted to know, did they have the atomic bomb? But we were also interested in what are they doing with electronics, and what are they, because they were so far ahead of us in many ways. So for the first time in Watches of the Night, I get to show Ben in flashbacks to the Second World War rather than just having references. So while the plot takes place in 61, 62, you see him take a tech team behind the lines. You see him when he was wounded. And the way he's wounded and saved is what actually happened to the real archivist, though the rest of the plot is totally fictional.
Now, like the real archivist, is Ben reticent to talk about his experiences?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
As many
Right.
veterans are.
Right.
So, what is the other book?
Well, the other book, while I was writing Watches of the Night, I happened to read about the Venona Code, which nobody talks about, unfortunately. In 91, after the wall came down and the Soviet Union collapsed, a well-known historian, 20th century historian from the Library of Congress, and a man that he works with, went to Russia and went into the KGB archives when they opened them to the public. They're now pretty much closed. And he found 3,000 coded, encrypted telegrams that the Russians sent to more than 300 agents in the United States in the 30s and 40s.
Ooh.
And he saw, he understood what the Russian side of those telegrams were, and we were never talking about what we knew about them or whatever. So he came back and wrote a couple articles. And Daniel Patrick Moynihan read the articles and went, why don't we know anything about this? And as a result of that questioning, the NSA released in 3 different batches in the late 90s our decryptions of those coded telegrams. Now, the Soviets never thought, they sent them in telegrams because even though they knew they were censored, they were one-time pad codes that can't be broken. So they saw no reason not to do it. It was the cheapest way to communicate with these 300 agents. And we actually were working on trying to decrypt them during the Second World War and after that in the 40s and 50s. And we began to be able to do that in like early 47. And the only reason we could was that for a period of 9 months in 1943, they used the same one-time pad every day. And I think nobody knows why they did that. Maybe they just couldn't produce enough, material that they continued to do that. So the only things that have ever been decrypted were from that 9-month period. But the very first one showed us in 47 that in 43, the Soviets were being given by spies at Los Alamos all of the information about our work on the atomic bomb.
Boy, that sounds fascinating.
And while that first bit was being decoded, one of the Russian scholars who was helping the guy doing the major decrypting was standing behind him and was asked for some help on a particular phrase. He was a Soviet agent.
Now, did you have to invoke the Freedom of Information Act in order
No,
to get
it had been released by this time, and I actually was fortunate enough to work with the librarian at the Library of Congress who wrote the initial books and did the initial work, and the historian from the NSA who released our decryptions. And there were, amongst these agents, the Rosenbergs were in those, Hiss was in those decrypted telegrams. There was no doubt from the KGB side that they were agents. Lachlan Curry in FDR's administration, Harry Dexter White, the people that actually did the negotiations at Yalta that gave Tito Yugoslavia and gave away most of Eastern Europe, were agents and are in those telegrams. And this is, it sounds wild, but it's absolutely documented. There are many books on this today, and the news media never talks about it.
No. Well, thank you so much for being on this show. We've been talking to Sally Wright, who's back again with us on Voices in Mystery. She has brought 2 books with her today, Code of Silence and Watches of the Night, and they both star our Ben Reese, the archivist who in the 1960s is able to solve mysteries. So thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you. I appreciate it.